Antarctica is a wholly unique place politically. No one owns the continent.
That's a tough one.
In 2018, investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe released the shadowed testimony of a retired U.S. Navy SEAL who claimed his 2003 mission to a geometric structure near Antarctica's Beardmore Glacier was immediately classified upon return. That story, of a man who spent decades in silence, bound by an oath he now believes the public has a right to hear broken, is not as rare as you might think. There is a place at the bottom of the world that holds more classified military history per square mile than almost anywhere on Earth. A continent the size of the United States and Mexico combined, governed by an international treaty, patrolled by no standing army, and yet visited by more intelligence operatives, secretive research teams, and blacked-out military missions than most active war zones. Antarctica. And what happened there? What was found? What was cataloged? What was ordered buried? Has been trickling out in fragments for nearly 80 years. Through declassified documents, through deathbed testimonies, through the fractured accounts of veterans who came home changed in ways they couldn't explain to their families. The man at the center of today's story came forward only recently. We will call him James. He is in his late 60s. He served with the United States Navy for 22 years, including one deployment to Antarctica that lasted 14 weeks, and that he was never, not once, permitted to discuss. He tried to take it to the grave. He almost did. But what his team uncovered beneath the Ross ice shelf, and what happened after they reported their findings up the chain of command, has convinced him that the silence has gone on long enough. What they found beneath the surface would challenge not just military protocol, but everything we think we know about who has been to Antarctica and when. To understand why Antarctica became one of the most militarized secrets in modern history, you have to go back to the winter of 1946. World War II had just ended. The world was fracturing into two ideological empires, American and Soviet, and both sides were scrambling to understand not just each other's capabilities, but the full geography of the planet itself. The poles, for the first time, had become strategic. On August 26, 1946, Admiral Chester Nimitz, the same man who commanded U.S. Pacific forces during the war, announced one of the largest military expeditions ever assembled. It was called Operation High Jump. Officially titled the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program, the operation involved 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. It was led by the legendary polar explorer Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, whose name had been attached to Antarctic exploration since 1928. The stated mission was logistical: establish the research base Little America 4 on the Ross Ice Shelf, test equipment in extreme cold, develop techniques for sustained polar operations, and conduct aerial mapping of the coastline. Those goals were real. The mission produced 49,000 photographs of Antarctica's coastline, among the most comprehensive aerial surveys ever attempted. But there was a classified objective, one that didn't appear in Byrd's November 1946 press conference, one that historians have only partially excavated from declassified State Department documents. The Navy was to do everything in its power to establish a basis for an American territorial claim in Antarctica. That mandate was classified at the time. More striking still, the operation ended abruptly, 3 months early. Byrd had planned for 6 to 8 months. He left after 8 weeks. In a 1947 interview with the International News Service, Byrd gave a statement that has puzzled researchers ever since. He warned his compatriots, and here the translation from the original Spanish-language Chilean interview matters, that the time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our isolation. He spoke of threats that could come from the poles, from any direction, fast. Pilot Conrad Gus Shin, who flew R-4D aircraft from the carrier USS Philippine Sea during Operation High Jump, later admitted with quiet candor, "We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know about precision flying or what we were looking at. They saw something they weren't prepared to interpret, and they went home. For decades, that would be the last officially acknowledged mass military presence in Antarctica. But it was not the last time the Navy sent men there, with orders they couldn't discuss. For weeks, the team found nothing remarkable. Then everything changed at once. James was not a conspiracy theorist. His former colleagues describe him as methodical, skeptical, and deeply patriotic. He spent the first years of his retirement saying nothing. It was only after a health scare, and after reading a 2012 article in Science magazine about the breakthrough drilling of Lake Vostok, that something inside him broke open. Lake Vostok. This is where the story begins to shift from military history into something much stranger. Buried beneath the Russian Vostok research station in East Antarctica, roughly 800 miles from the South Pole, lies the largest known subglacial lake on Earth. It is comparable in surface area to Lake Ontario. It sits under more than 2 miles of ice. And according to scientists who have studied it for decades, it has been sealed from the surface of the Earth for somewhere between 15 and 20 million years. Let that number settle. 15 million years. Russian geographer Andrei Kapitsa first suspected the lake's existence based on seismic soundings taken during Soviet Antarctic expeditions in 1959 and 1964. It wasn't confirmed until 1993 when satellite-based radar technology penetrated the ice and revealed the full scope of what was hiding below. The journal Nature formally announced the discovery in June 1996, and on February 5, 2012, a Russian drilling team, after years of engineering work so careful and precise it bordered on reverence, penetrated Lake Vostok for the very first time. They drilled through nearly 4 kilometers of ice. They reached water that had not touched air since before the first hominids walked the African savanna. What they found in the accretion ice surrounding the lake, the frozen interface between the glacier and the water below, was published in scientific journals over the following years. More than 3,500 unique genetic sequences were identified. Around 94% came from bacteria, but there were also signs of more complex organisms: fungi, crustaceans, sea anemones, fish. In 2013, team leader Sergei Bulat of the St. Petersburg Nuclear Physics Institute announced the identification of a bacterial species unlike anything previously categorized. Its DNA was less than 86% similar to any known bacterial DNA on Earth. Bulat called it, and this is the phrase that quietly circulated through certain scientific and intelligence communities, unidentified and unclassified life. James had read that phrase, and he had heard it before, in a briefing, in Antarctica, 15 years earlier. That alone would have been enough to rewrite the textbooks, but the team wasn't done. James paused for a long time when he reached this part of his account. He looked at his hands. Then he said, "I want to be careful, because I understand how this sounds." What James describes begins with routine survey work. His unit was operating in the vicinity of the Beardmore Glacier, a vast river of ice flowing roughly 93 miles from the Trans-Antarctic Mountains toward McMurdo Sound and the Ross Ice Shelf. It is one of the largest glaciers on Earth, and it is one of the most studied, mapped, and traversed features of the Antarctic interior. His team was not there to study glaciology. They were there because ground-penetrating radar had flagged an anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, works by sending electromagnetic pulses into a surface and measuring what bounces back. It is used by archaeologists, geologists, military engineers, and polar scientists all over the world. It is not exotic technology. What it flagged near the Beardmore Glacier was not immediately interpretable. The anomaly appeared at a depth of approximately 40 meters below the ice surface. It had a geometric quality, not the irregular fractal roughness of compressed snow and rock, but something with consistent angular returns, consistent spacing, the kind of signature that, in an urban environment, might indicate buried infrastructure. A wall, a floor, a foundation. James's unit was ordered in to conduct a physical assessment. They were flown by helicopter from McMurdo Station. They were given no additional briefing beyond what the radar had shown them. What they found, he says, was a space. an enclosed space beneath the ice. The walls, as far as they could determine with the equipment they had, were made of something that was not glacier ice and was not bedrock. He does not know what it was made of. He does know that within 4 hours of their initial report, 2 things happened. A senior officer arrived by helicopter with orders that had come, James is certain of this, from outside the normal chain of command. And every piece of documentation the unit had generated in the preceding 72 hours was collected and secured. They were told they had been conducting routine avalanche risk assessment. They were told to remember that. They were told to say that. James said it for 40 years. At this point, researchers who take these accounts seriously assume they have their answer. They are almost always wrong. James is not alone. This is the part of the story that should give the most careful listener pause. Not because the accounts are identical, which they are not, but because the pattern of suppression they describe is. In 2018, award-winning investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, whose career spans decades of carefully documented anomalous phenomena, released the video testimony of a retired U.S. Navy SEAL operating under the pseudonym Spartan 1. His face was shadowed, his voice was altered. Howe stated publicly that she had personally vetted his military credentials and that his documentation was authentic. Spartan 1 described a classified mission conducted in 2003. A U.S. Navy SEAL Special Operations team was dispatched to a location near the Beardmore Glacier, approximately 93 miles from McMurdo Station, to investigate a structure discovered by ground-penetrating radar. The structure was described as a perfectly geometric 8-sided form, an octagon. It extended downward through the glacier. The walls, Spartan 1 estimated, were between 18 and 30 feet thick. The ceiling height was approximately 22 to 28 feet. He entered through a doorway approximately 50 feet below the ice surface. Inside, he found something he could not explain, and which he declined to fully describe. What he would say was this: there was a chamber. There was a symbol on a surface inside that chamber. And the moment his team returned to McMurdo and filed their report, the mission was classified at a level he had never encountered before in his career. Now, if you are a skeptic, and healthy skepticism is warranted here, you will note that pseudonymous testimony, however sincerely delivered, cannot be verified by outside parties. That is true. Spartan 1 could not be named. His documentation was reviewed by one journalist and not independently corroborated. But here is what gives even determined skeptics reason to sit with the question a little longer. The geography matches. The methodology matches. The description of the suppression protocol, the rapid arrival of senior personnel, the collection of documentation, the assignment of a cover narrative, matches accounts from multiple individuals who have no documented connection to one another and who came forward across a span of decades. This is the detail that keeps researchers up at night. To understand the full weight of what James and others describe, you need to understand something that is not conspiracy theory. It is published, peer-reviewed, verifiable science. Antarctica has not always been what it is today. Roughly 66 million years ago, Antarctica, then still connected to Australia, had a tropical to subtropical climate. It had forests, it had fauna. It was warm enough to sustain complex life. Then, the continental drift pulled it to the pole, the climate shifted, and the ice came. Slowly, over millions of years, it buried everything. Ice core samples taken from various Antarctic drilling programs indicate that portions of the continent may have been ice-free as recently as 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. Some researchers put the most recent ice-free period even later. That is within the span of recorded human civilization. British scientists, using satellite imaging in 2013, detected ancient river systems beneath the ice, vast drainage networks that once carried liquid water across what is now a frozen desert. The continent hid a world beneath it that existed in warm, wet, biologically productive conditions. And then there are the 675 known subglacial lakes. Not one, not Lake Vostok alone, 675. A 2022 study published by scientists at Sheffield University cataloged more than 700 of them, scattered across the continent, likely interconnected through a network of subglacial rivers flowing invisibly beneath miles of ice. If something was built in Antarctica, by anyone, in any era, the ice would preserve it. The pressure of miles of glacier above would seal it from atmospheric decay. The darkness and cold would arrest biological and chemical degradation. The ice is not just a barrier, it is a vault. The data was clear, the implications were anything but. If you're finding this fascinating, a like truly helps this channel continue investigating these mysteries. We need to be honest about where we are in this story. Everything in Phase 2 of this video, Operation High Jump, Lake Vostok, the subglacial river systems, the science of ice preservation, is verifiable. It is sourced. You can find the papers in Nature, in Science, in the publications of NASA's astrobiology program and the National Science Foundation's Office of Polar Programs. What James describes, and what Spartan 1 described, is not verified. It is testimony. Sincere, consistent with known geography, and internally coherent, but testimony nonetheless. With that clearly stated, let us follow the question where it leads. If something was constructed in Antarctica prior to the formation of its current ice sheet, and the science confirms that large portions of the continent were accessible and habitable within geologically recent time, then who built it? Three possibilities are seriously discussed in academic and fringe literature alike. The first is the most conservative. The structure represents the remnant of a pre-ice human civilization. Not aliens, not supernatural intervention, but an advanced human society, or proto-human society, that existed during a warm period in Antarctic history and whose physical traces were sealed beneath the advancing ice. This theory finds some indirect support in ancient cartography. The Piri-Reis map of 1513 and the Orontius Phineus map of 1531 both depict an ice-free southern continent in surprising geographic detail, centuries before Antarctica was officially discovered by any European expedition in 1820. Some historians dismiss these maps as speculation and misinterpretation. Others argue the coastline renderings are too accurate for coincidence. The second possibility, which some researchers connect to the genetic anomaly in Lake Vostok, is more radical. That life in Antarctica did not simply survive the ice in microbial form, but that it evolved, over millions of years of isolation, into something we do not yet have a framework to classify. The bacteria Sergei Bulot's team described as unidentified and unclassified was found in the accretion ice, not the lake itself. What remains in the lake, sealed under 350 atmospheres of pressure, in permanent darkness, cut off for 15 million years, is still largely unknown. The 2013 study by researchers at Bowling Green State University identified genetic sequences from crustaceans, mollusks, sea anemones, and fish in that same ice. These are not simple organisms. Something complex was alive down there. Of course, there are simpler explanations for much of this. Geological formations can produce surprisingly regular shapes. Ice movement creates artifacts that look structured when rendered by radar. Institutional secrecy in military contexts is often about protecting logistics and personnel rather than hiding transformative discoveries. The pattern of suppression James describes could be, as he himself acknowledges, the routine behavior of a military bureaucracy unused to transparency. But the mystery persists anyway, because the scientific record, stripped of everything speculative, still tells us this: beneath the ice of Antarctica, there exists a preserved world, lakes, river systems, geological formations, that we have barely begun to explore. And the nations with the most resources and the most classified polar programs have been operating there, in secrecy, since before the continent was formally opened to international scientific cooperation in 1959. The third possibility, the one James himself raises, quietly, near the end of his account, is the one that is hardest to sit with. That whatever was found near the Beardmore Glacier was not constructed by any civilization we know of. That the 8-sided room beneath the ice, with its walls of unknown material and its symbol on a surface no human hand should have carved, represents contact with something that preceded us on this planet by an interval of time we cannot comfortably imagine. He does not say he believes this. He says he does not know what to believe. He just knows what he saw. There is something almost unbearable about the image of a man spending 40 years carrying a secret he doesn't understand. Not a secret he could explain with enough context or argue down into something manageable, but a gap, a fundamental fracture in his understanding of the world that he has carried alone, in silence, at dinner tables and family reunions and church services and VA appointments. James is not asking anyone to believe him. He said that clearly. He is not writing a book. He is not selling anything. He sat in front of a recorder and talked for 3 hours because, he said, the feeling of carrying it alone had finally become heavier than the fear of being disbelieved. What strikes the careful observer about his account, and about the account of Spartan 1, and about the accounts of dozens of other individuals who have described Antarctica-related anomalies across the past 7 decades, is not the content, it is the texture, the consistency of emotional detail, the specific way they all describe the moment of suppression. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but procedural, bureaucratic, like a form being processed. Clip the report, collect the documentation, brief the cover story, sign here. That is not how men describe encounters they have invented. And it is not how governments behave toward things they consider unremarkable. In 2017, researchers at the IceCube Neutrino Observatory, a real scientific installation buried deep in the Antarctic ice near the South Pole, detected unexplained high-energy neutrino bursts, appearing to originate from within the Earth itself. The anomaly was noted in published literature, and then received remarkably little follow-up public discussion, given its potential implications. Neutrinos pass through almost everything. The things that stop them, or produce them in unusual configurations, are not ordinary. The continent remains, officially, a zone of peace, a place for science, a place protected by the Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by 12 nations, now with 54 signatories. No military fortifications, no weapons testing, no permanent human territorial claims, and yet 4,700 men went there in 1946 with an aircraft carrier, 3 months before they were supposed to leave. And what they photographed in 49,000 aerial images has never been fully released to the public. James ended his account with something that has stayed with me. He said, "I'm not asking anyone to believe what I saw. I'm asking them to ask why it was necessary to bury it." That question deserves to sit in the air for a moment, because there is a real answer to it, and a terrifying one, and it applies regardless of what, exactly, was found in that chamber beneath the Beardmore Glacier. The logic of institutional secrecy is not always sinister, but the logic of sustained, multi-decade cross-administration suppression, the kind that persists through political transitions and generational turnover in military leadership, that kind of secrecy has a different quality. It doesn't look like bureaucratic caution. It looks like policy. And policies have authors. And authors have reasons. The 675 subglacial lakes beneath Antarctica's ice are real. The ancient river systems are real. The preservation capacity of miles of glacial ice is real. The bacteria that doesn't match any known taxonomy is real. The abrupt early conclusion of Operation High Jump is real. The classified territorial mandate that didn't appear in any press release is real. What happened to the men who went into a space beneath the Beardmore Glacier in 2003, and possibly decades before, is not something that can be verified from a distance. But it can be asked about, which leads to the question that every account like this eventually arrives at. Not what is down there, though that matters. Not who built it, though that matters too. But simply this: if what they found beneath the ice was nothing, if it was geological, ordinary, explicable, then why, in 60 years of Antarctic operations, has not a single government with classified presence on that continent ever said so?